All right, welcome to the show, Laura.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Tom. How are you?
Absolutely, I'm doing great. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for those of you who have not met Laura yet, Laura Morton has written over 40 books and a staggering 19 New York Times bestsellers with a wide range of celebrities, including Al Roker, Justin Bieber, Joan Lunden, Danica Patrick, just to name a few. She's worked in the entertainment industry for more than 25 years as a writer, producer, speaker, and entrepreneur, and continues to pursue projects in publishing, production, and electronic media through her company, Laura Morton Management. Laura, it's great to have you.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So tell us your story. I mean, how did you get started as an author, as a writer?
Well, I was actually working as a television producer originally, and I would hire people to do scripts for me, and I would get really frustrated at spending all this money because I would get these scripts back and I would end up rewriting the scripts. And so what I realized was that I had a knack for storytelling and I had a knack for writing. And ultimately, the people that I was working with on the television side, I started working with in doing other kinds of projects. And my first book was with Joan Lunden. I had worked with her, produced her exercise video. I originally pioneered the celebrity exercise video market, which the fact that I'm even using the word video tells you that it was a long time ago.
Yeah, definitely. So that's how you kind of got into working with celebrities. Then I assume Joan was your first client, and then how did your career progress from there?
Joan was my first client, but she was my first book that I worked on. I had actually been in and around the celebrity market for a great deal of my career. I actually had started off as a headhunter, which had nothing to do with working with celebrity, but I had done a videotape on how to interview for a job. And I had sold Chrysler 70,000 copies of that videotape to their college promotions division. And I thought, that's a lot more fun producing and creating programming. And, my creative side was always there than getting people jobs, actually. I enjoyed the creative side a lot more. And so I moved to California and I started a production company. And so I worked in and around celebrity my entire career thereafter. But Joan was the first book that I wrote. And in fact, the first book that we wrote together, her agent thought was a terrible idea at the time because it was a cookbook and also a little bit of weight loss memoir. And at the time, he said, Joan doesn't cook. And but she was also the host of Good Morning America, and she had 20 million viewers a week, and she was in the kitchen with people like Wolfgang Puck and Julia Child and all these great chefs. So America saw her in their kitchen every morning, and it didn't matter to me or to her if she cooked. We thought that we were right and he was wrong, and as it turned out, we were right and he was wrong. So we put that book on the New York Times bestseller list almost immediately, where it stayed for a very long time, and it spawned a great career for her as an author, and for me as well.
That's awesome. So I know you do things a little bit differently. Like most writers who write books with celebrities or for celebrities, they're ghost writers. Their name doesn't appear on the title. They're not on the cover. But you do it really differently. So tell us about that and how that works.
Yeah, so, a lot of people do refer to me as a ghostwriter, and I always tell people that if you want my name off the cover, it costs you more. And I do have a few clients that where my name has not appeared on the cover, like Justin Bieber, because for them, image is everything. The appearance that Justin wrote his own book, that's important for his fan base. But I'm considered more of a co-author or a collaborator because the work that I do really falls into that category of being collaborative. And I've gotten to a place in my career where I've written enough that it doesn't bother me to, when people do call me a ghostwriter. But I think that, the notion of being a ghostwriter is that you don't exist. And so, for someone like Justin, I think that's important for his image and his branding. But the truth is I do exist. And the work that I do is very important to the ultimate outcome. Although I write in first person. So when I'm working with someone like Susan Lucci, for example, or Dog the Bounty Hunter, and that you're talking about two very different personalities there. I'm writing in first person, so I'm writing as Dog or I'm writing as Susan, and I never get the voices confused. That's for sure. But the art is in not having a voice on the page and really only isolating their voice. But the real spirit is to come at it from a collaborative point of view. And so that is why I think being referred to as a collaborator or as a co-author makes what I do very different. Although what a ghostwriter does, I think their work is essentially very much the same. But they don't get credit. I also have ownership in the majority of the books that I write.
Mm-hmm. So that means you get a percentage of the royalties?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I learned that very early on from my production days.
Yeah, it's better to be an owner than just a one-time fee, right? It's
a business lesson 101.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. That's really cool. It's exciting to see you doing that. I think a lot of authors could take, definitely a lesson from that it's always better to have some part of the ownership in the long run, for sure.
It is. I think it's incentive for the writer. Some books pay off and some books don't, but I think it's always incentive for the writer and to be involved in the process and to have some skin in the game. And I think it's a mistake for anyone to think that their writer, wouldn't want something to be a part of that project, because they really bear the brunt of the work. Look, whoever I work for doesn't make their living writing books. I do. And so it really is, in essence, a partnership of sorts. And they rely on what I do for them. I always tell people it's a relationship of truth and trust. And, you sit down with somebody, it's the craziest relationship you can develop. And, you meet somebody, it's almost like an odd blind date. You sit down and you meet somebody for the first time, and you ask them to trust you with their life story, with their legacy, with their business branding piece. Whatever. I've worked with, titans of business every bit as much as I worked with rock stars. And, you are asking them to put that legacy piece in your hands. And it's different than, so many celebrities have been trained by their media coaches to give very short, succinct answers so that, the New York Times can't misquote them. And, now you're saying to them, you have freedom. Tell me everything. I want all the details. And trust me to do the right thing with it, because you'll have a chance to read it. You'll have a chance to vet it. And we can write to the edge and pull it back, and only you and I will know what was there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like trust is a huge part of that relationship, for sure.
It has to be. If that trust is broken, it'll never work. If they don't like you or you don't like them, the relationship will never work. You have to become their best friend, their therapist. You never want to be the appointment on their schedule that when they look at their day or their week, you don't want to be the appointment that gets knocked off the list first.
Right. You want to do something that they're actually looking forward to, right?
You do. And, and believe me, these are very, very busy people, and as am I. And so, everybody, we all live in a highly scheduled world, everybody these days. And, you definitely want to carve out that kind of rapport with somebody where they look forward to that time. And, and I never utilize someone's time. I don't abuse their time. Especially a lot of the super high achievers that I work with, they love to get into a room and they want to go 8 hours a day. And I always laugh, and, when they want, that's the desire, and I appreciate it. But there's a point of diminishing returns, even for the very best of the best, between 3 and 4 hours. And I always tell them, you're going to be exhausted by the end of this. And they think that they can, the stamina to go longer than that. By, the 4th hour, they're tired, and they sleep really well that night because they go places that they don't expect to go. And it's emotional. When you talk about yourself for 4 hours, and it doesn't matter what you're talking about, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So how much time do you normally spend with your clients? How long does it take for these conversations, for these interviews, until you're just ready to sit down and write?
Typically, I tell people I can get their entire life story between 25 and 30 hours, and that's if they're very cooperative. Not everyone is cooperative. Not everyone's ready to go there. It's very rare that I'll work on a project that goes on more than a year. So, in and out about a year. But I don't do it in 25 hours. Let's say, I won't sit down with somebody and do 5 days of 5-hour days, because it's just too much to try to get out of somebody in one shot, unless that's their window and that's how we have to do it. But what happens is books, just like, and I'm sure you know this from the creative point of view, when you're telling someone's life story and it's linear, you can go straight through, right? But when you're really creating something, it takes on a life. So, are you hearing that?
Yeah, but don't worry about it.
Okay, because they were supposed to be put away. Sorry. Do you want me to have them put away?
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So when you're, when you're creating something, sometimes the best material comes from the digging. And so I really look forward to that, because a lot of times we'll start off writing, and those are not memoirs so much as they are the inspirational self-help books. And so sometimes we'll start off writing something and it'll take a sharp left turn because something happens in that person's life, and it changes the meaning or the purpose of what we're doing. And those books always turn out much better. I mean, I've had clients that filed for divorce in the middle of a project, and that changes the entire story. And, one of my favorite quotes is, "The truth is circumstantial, and we must strive each day to live in our truth." And so what was true yesterday might not be true today. So, and that happens all the time.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, when you're working with clients, like when you have that first initial meeting, like, are you kind of selling them on the project? Are they already decided they want to write a book? Like, how does that actually work that, someone like Justin Bieber says, "Hey, I want to write a book and I want to work with you"?
So I very rarely approach people about writing. They come to me, and they either come to me through word of mouth or through my agency. And either we're packaged together through the agency that I'm with, William Morris Endeavor, or through someone that we know in common, managers, agents, professional acquaintances. I'm friends with a lot of people in the industry. A lot of the professional people that I've worked with, a lot of the business leaders that I've worked with, that's a lot of referral. I did a book with John Maxwell last year that came through another business leader that I was working with. I met John. You live where do you live?
In Hawaii.
Oh, you're in Hawaii?
Yeah.
I love Hawaii. That's where Dog lives.
Yeah.
And I went on a bounty hunt with Dog in Hawaii. But I was in Indiana, and I was at an event for one of the CEOs that I worked with, and we were at the arena where the Indiana Pacers play, and we were like in the underground of the arena, or the underbelly of the arena, and there was like this private room where the players eat before the game, and John Maxwell walked in, and he looked at me and goes, "I need you." Okay, I'm in. Hard guy to say no to. He's really charismatic and really cool guy.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so these, celebrities and business leaders, they've already got this idea, like they want to have a book done. What is usually their goal? What are they looking to get out of the project? What is their kind of end result they have in mind?
So, I generalize this answer that people, so I don't want to say celebrities, but people write books for one of 3 reasons. And it would be, it's a branding piece. They need the money, or it's some kind of legacy piece. So that's what they want to get out of it. In some cases, it's strictly a business. Hey, you can make money off of this, right? And I think there is a fantasy of what they can make versus the reality of what they can make, or they're going to get a big fat advance from a publisher that may or may never pay out. And in many cases today, more than ever, a lot of the celebrity books just don't pay out. I think the legacy piece is one of the better reasons that my clients write books. This is the piece I want to leave behind. This is what I want to be remembered for. And then the branding piece, which I think is also really relevant. For somebody in business, it's, this is who we are. But for somebody who really wants to establish themselves as a professional, it's a really great way to, put down their ideas and thoughts as a thought leader, or, business management, even as a celebrity who has a voice for whatever their cause is. Maybe they've been through something very traumatic. If they wanted to share that story, those kinds of things. And I think that that's really, those are the three main reasons why I think somebody writes a book. Usually it's some transition in their lives that brings them to that calling.
Mm-hmm. What kind of transition do you mean?
Well, I think that usually people, it's the number one rule in writing, right? Write what you know. So it could be a loss. It could be a diagnosis of cancer. It could be maybe a divorce, maybe the birth of a child. Look at how many celebrities have written, children's books after they became parents. Something that really touches them, and so they want to share those experiences. And so many people love to read, and lucky for me, people love to read celebrity experiences. Weight loss, great topic. I mean, I did Jennifer Hudson's weight loss book. People love a great victory. So when somebody overcomes any kind of challenge in their lives, I think people really love to read those victory stories.
Absolutely. So how do you tell your stories? I mean, I know, you do these interviews that take 25 hours, but I know you also do lots of speaking on the art of storytelling. So can you tell us about that? Like, how do you take, the story of someone's life, which, even if they're a celebrity, is not all that interesting necessarily, and then turn that into a story that's really compelling that people actually want to read?
Sure. Thanks for asking that, because this is becoming a new passion of mine. It was after I did John Maxwell's book about 18 months ago. That book is called Intentional Living. And it's a great conversation that we had. If only we all learn to be very intentional in our lives at a very early age. So often we as we get older, we start asking the tougher questions as we get older. But if we were, told at age 18 or even younger, I have a 7-year-old, to be very intentional. We were taught to be very intentional in our lives every single day. Imagine how different the world would be. And the more you start thinking about concepts like this, the more you realize there's a lot that we can do with our lives. And, I've made a wonderful career out of telling other people's stories. But what I realized was that I had this very deep well that I could go to. And in sharing other people's stories, I had a wealth of information that I find myself every day sharing with people and helping people through their own, crises in life. And what I thought was that I had more to offer than just telling other people's stories. I had my own story to share. So I started giving speeches, and what made my content so unique was the context of my content. And I think that's what, we live in a world today where content is really important, but I think context is also equally important, because, we all scroll, if we're checking Facebook or if we're checking Twitter, I mean, especially Twitter's, something we all just kind of swipe our finger. Maybe we read, maybe we don't, but if there's some kind of link, we'll click on it. But we are just all about fast content. And what I thought I really could bring to my material was something so unique. How many people on the planet have told so many other people's life stories? Now take that and bring all of their life experiences, not just the ones that I put in the book, right? But the ones that I've heard that aren't in the book. And I have all of those stored away. And it's amazing what I can draw on to bring that material forward. And I talk about, things that never happened to me as if they did, because I write in first person. And so it makes me super fun at dinner parties, and two, I'm a really great speaker because of it. And it makes me really diverse, but it makes my content and my context incredibly, incredibly unique, because it's my story of telling other people's stories and those life lessons that I've been able to cherry pick and not have to go through. And yet I've learned so much. It's extraordinary. I've been one of the greatest studies of human nature on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, can you explain a little bit more about context and content for people who maybe just completely new writers listening who don't really understand that?
Sure.
What's the difference, and why is that important when you're telling a story?
Sure. Well, I think now more than ever, we live in a world where people have very short attention spans. And so you have to hit people very quickly with information. And so that's, in terms of my speaking, that's what I'm talking about. In terms of writing, I think the great example that I can give you is text messaging. I think it is a perfect example, or emailing. I have a steadfast rule where I won't argue with someone over text messaging because things get so misunderstood so quickly. And that's a perfect example of content versus context. Because if you're having a bad day and somebody else isn't, and you're, reading someone's text message, they didn't mean anything by it, but the way you perceive it can be very negative. So I think it's really, really important that the information, the material that you put out in your writing, you have to be very concise, very to the point. There is a great difference as somebody who's written both as men and women. And now this gets really fascinating, right? I understand the intricacies of how men and women communicate. And, men absolutely do not they talk in very short sentences. Men are not, in general, flowery, eloquent writers. Then, at least most of the men that I've worked with, that is very different from most of the women that I work with. Most of the women want to be poetic in their writing, even if they don't speak that way. And what's so fascinating is when I give the material back to somebody, the men will recognize their voice on the page in a heartbeat, and most of the women won't, because how they hear themselves. And this is, and I don't really want to make that distinction, men versus women, but how we hear ourselves and how we read on the page is not always the same. Content, context. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I notice that for sure. When I write, it's different than my speaking voice. And I think part of my journey as an author was, blending those two things together so that it was me on the page and when I'm speaking, so that there wasn't this kind of huge dichotomy between the two.
It was a challenge for me in writing for the page and writing for speaking. It was a challenge for me to really cut back because I had to learn to get to the point. In writing, you have the luxury of time and space. And in speaking, you don't. That clock is ticking down to 20 minutes or whatever it is. And I work with a media coach who loved my writing so much that she was actually losing her edge as my coach. And then she, circled back around and said, you know what? We've got to cut it back. You're running long in every single speech. And so I was really grateful. And that's why I worked with a coach, because I knew that my content was really good. And we should all have the problem of having too much good content, right? And, but as she called it, now we have to decide, which of your babies we have to kill, because there were so many good lines, and which of these do we take out? And so it's a very different experience when you're writing for a speech versus writing for the page.
Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with that. And I also think, when you're writing a book, there's a lot of times it's important what you leave out, not just what you put in. I think there's a lot of times where, I'm sure you've had this experience with clients where you've got so many stories, you can't put them all in the book, right? And so I think creating any kind of content, you have to go through that curation process where, okay, this is a good idea, but maybe it's not good enough for this project. Yeah,
totally. And we also forward think. So we know if it's somebody that has more than one book in them, we know that we have to hold things back. We don't want to take everything and put it in, I call it kitchen sinking, because it's, and then I have clients who honestly really only have one book in them. And, in television, we would call that a one-off. But it's where, one-hit wonder in music. And there are people that really just have one book in them, but maybe it's one great book, and that's an incredible thing. Listen, there are people that will never write a book. They dream about it. They want to. But they just don't have the discipline or the ability to sit down and really do it. I call that job security, but it is not an easy thing to do. But I believe that, average people have above average stories. I believe there are so many incredible lives out there. You don't have to be a celebrity. You don't have to be a sports star. You don't have to be a musician. You don't have to be a broadcast journalist to have your story told. And that's where I get so frustrated with publishers, in particularly traditional publishers, and what their criteria is to, make their selection.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, I'm curious, what your thoughts are on, things like biographies and autobiographies, because I love reading old ones like, Benjamin Franklin and all these old biographies and autobiographies. But, some of those books like Titan on John D. Rockefeller, it's like 900 pages. I mean, it's the biggest, most complex book I've ever read. I mean, I think most people would completely hate that book just because the way it's written. I'm wondering, has the reading audience changed so much that books like that will just never even exist anymore? And what are your thoughts on that?
I think there is an audience for that, because I still think there are occasionally books that come out like that. And there occasionally you will get a 700 or 900 page biography. But I think that the attention span just isn't there anymore. And I think the ability to do the research on somebody, I think that people now today, their need for privacy, is there. But specifically to answer your question, I think for me, I collect memoirs pre-1900. So I'm with you. I'm totally in your camp. I find them challenging to read, but I find them lovely to read. And it goes beyond the writing for me. It also goes to the design. It goes to the way that the books were put together, the end papers, the leather bound. I mean, there's so many elements of the books that I really love. That now, even when I design books, because I'm involved now in packaging and designing books, I love bringing some of those elements. I have clients that don't, that where they want beautiful books. And so I'm able to bring some of those elements to life again. But I'm with you. I have a love for the material, but I don't think that passion, I don't believe that audience is as big as it could be.
Right. And that's not really what publishers are buying.
No, listen, one, the book would be too expensive. The price point of a 900 page book. I mean, Walter Isaacson, that's who comes to my mind. Like a Walter Isaacson book, is a rare find. But, publishers want 75,000 pages. I mean, 75,000 words, 256 pages. They're going to put it on cheap paper. They're going to, and the average reader wants to blast through that book in, 2 or 3 days. To sit down and read a Walter Isaacson book or something, that you have to read with a dictionary, with a source, something next to you, is a very special audience that you're writing for. And I will readily admit I don't write for that audience. And I just don't know. I mean, those are my friends that are still doing the New York Times crossword on a Sunday morning with ink. They're not doing it on their iPad. You know what I'm saying? They're still doing it with ink. I might still tackle one, but I'm using a pencil.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Fascinating. So, what is like the future look like for you? I mean, what are some projects that you're looking forward to now?
I'm enjoying, for me, with the advent of my speaking, I'm enjoying, for me, to take on a new project, to take on a new book, it has to have a certain criteria, and that criteria for me is that it has to add value. So it has to give something back to the community. So any of the books that I'm getting involved in now need to advocate for change in the system. They have to bring something to someone's life. I'm also getting involved in books that have some kind of potential to be turned into film. I just finished an amazing book about a lawsuit that it was a lawyer out of Miami and Washington, D.C. that said yes to a case that 12 other major law firms said no to, as a little boy that was born with no eyes because his mother had been pregnant and was walking her daughter outside of a U-picket field in Florida, like strawberries. And she stopped to see a tractor that had gotten stuck in the mud. And she didn't realize while she was standing there that the tractor was spraying a mist. And she got hit with the mist. And she thought it was water. She had no idea because it was odorless and tasteless. And she was 9 weeks pregnant. And there was only 1 week during her pregnancy where this could have happened. But she didn't know until her son was born. And he was born with no eyes. And it turned out that it was the chemical that she had been hit with that caused that birth defect. So it's the story of the lawsuit that was brought against DuPont for the chemical that this farmer was using. And DuPont was aware of the effect that the chemical could have on pregnant women, and they still brought it to market. And it was their most, it was their highest grossing product. It was a multi-billion-dollar product for DuPont. But what was remarkable about this case, one, it is the first and only case in U.S. history where an individual went up against a chemical company for a birth defect and won. And you can so imagine, it's a David and Goliath story. So imagine, a giant company like DuPont not crushing an individual. And it was a very small law firm at the time that represented this woman, and they did everything. I mean, the tactics that they did to take down the lawyer and the law firm are unbelievable. And so, but what is also very interesting about this case is that this is the case that is now used universally for junk science. So the science that gets products like this in the tobacco, pharmaceutical, and chemical industries, right? This is the science that gets their products to market. When these companies get sued, their own science is what gets used against them, and then they go, oh, that science? Well, that's junk. So, yeah. And so this was a landmark case because their own science was used against them, and then they were like, well, yeah, you can't use that science against us because that was junk science. And so now we are now advocating changes in the law in Washington. So this book is really special. And these are the kinds of things I love working on now, which is totally, as you can see, totally different than like writing, a book with Justin or, the Jonas Brothers or, it's not to in any way demean my work with anybody that I've ever worked with. But these are the things that I love, getting involved with now, because not only do I think that, we can make an impact for everybody, you, me. I mean, we're exposed to things every single day, but I do think that we're going to get a great feature film made out of this book.
That's awesome. It's so inspiring. I mean, that's the kind of stories I love to work with too. I mean, actually one of my clients is one of the top natural pest control experts in the world. And he's always advocating, don't use pesticides. There's so many natural ways to treat any pest problem, you have. So I love that. So I'm curious, for other authors, maybe someone just starting out, they haven't hit their career big like you have.
Sure.
Should they go for that passion project like you're talking about with this pesticide story, or should they focus on maybe something more marketable? What would your advice be if you're someone new just starting out?
That's such a great question, Tom. Here's my advice. Write what you love and write what you know. And I think that there is so much material out there, but don't go for something because if you're not connected to the material, it won't work. You have to connect to the material and you have to be passionate about it, because that is where your best work comes from. and know what you want, know where you want to land, and then work backwards. Know where you want this to take you, right? What's the end result? And then, we don't always know the end of the book or the end of the story, but where do you want this to take you? What do you want to get out of it? So, if you know that coming into it, that's the goal. Everything you do then drives you towards that goal. Where do you want this to take me? I want to have a blog. I want to have a book deal. I want to have, if that's the goal, everything drives you towards that. For me, I got so lucky when I got involved in this business, but I was a business person getting involved in this business. And I just took everything that I knew about doing business and just changed the widget. I mean, that's really what happened. But, for somebody just getting involved in this, you can't go, you can't jump into something if you can't go all in, right? And that's, I would tell anybody, I would give anybody that advice about anything, but especially about writing. If writing's not your passion, don't choose it as a career, because it'll be a frustrating career.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And that just makes sense. I mean, I love how you said, going all in. I think that's exactly what it takes, because you're going to, no matter what story you're working on or what book you're working on, you're going to get this point where, you're bored of the topic, or you don't want to sit down to write that day, or, you're not even sure why you're doing this. Your parents think you're crazy, whatever.
Right.
You're going to have all these obstacles come up. And if you're not so passionate and committed about it, you're just going to give up, and you're not going to have the success that you're looking for. And even if you do get that book deal or get it published, you still have to keep pushing and keep marketing and keep promoting, even when there's always those downturns,
And it's all on you, because that fantasy that you're going to have this fabulous editor at some publishing house that's really behind you and your agent's going to take your call, doesn't happen. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure you've interviewed a lot of people, and, it's all on you. And now more than ever, I mean, look, we live in a world where social media is your best friend. So that's really where you want to create. If you can't sit down and write one day, get on social media. Take whatever your thoughts are and just start doing something on social media and create your platform there, because that is really where, everything is driven. And, I've always juggled several projects at the same time. So if I didn't feel like I could write this today, I could write that today, and if I didn't have, that story in me, at least I had that story to go to. And it was very rare that I didn't have anything to do. And, that was the only time my accountant never got worried about me, was when I had nothing to do, because that's when I always bought a house. So, he was much happier when I was working. And then I always bought a house that needed a lot of work. So, yeah.
Yeah, you got to find a way to keep yourself busy and hopefully in a more productive way.
I pumped out, there's a period of time where I was pumping out 7 books a year. So, and they never really overlapped. I never had the same deadline, but I always had something to do. And that is, busy people stay busy. And busy people are always working. And if you're always working, people want to work with you. And that is the best advice I can offer. If you stay busy, people are going to see you as busy. And there's a difference between, I'm so busy, I've got to go to the dry cleaner, I've got to pick up my dog. That's not what I'm talking about. Busy people are working. They get up in the morning and, they look forward to whatever that day brings, but they are at their desk. Listen, it's a lot of discipline to sit down at my desk every single morning and write, but I do it. And I've been doing it for 30 years. And I don't know if I look like I've been doing it for 30 years, but it's, I've been doing it for a really long time, and I still look forward to it. And the day that I don't look forward to it is the day that I won't do it anymore. Because when you lose that passion, when you lose that spark, when you lose that enthusiasm, you lose your edge. And there are a lot of people doing what I do for a lot less money than I do it. And guess what? I'm still working. People still want to work with me.
That's great advice. That just makes sense. People want to work with, like you said, someone who's busy. I'm sure you've all had experiences, if you go to a networking event and you meet someone new and they're like, well, I would really just love some work right now. I'd love some project right now. But, instead, if they just said, oh, I'm working on this side project and I'm so excited about this book I'm working on. And, it's a totally different vibe. And then, it communicates the similar message that, hey, I'm a writer. This is what I do professionally, in a completely different way that attracts people to you instead of repels them from you.
I don't know I don't want to go off color here, but I'll try to be delicate. Do you know who the Mayflower Madam was?
Not really.
Okay. Well, she was a madam in New York City, and she came from a blue blood family, very prim and proper family. And she like started a brothel in New York City. It was like the late 80s, early 90s. But she, wore Chanel suits, and she was very proper. And they interviewed her on her advice on great sex, right? And her advice was enthusiasm. And they actually asked her a different question, but I'm keeping it like this, and I'm telling you, people love to be around enthusiastic people. And the difference, what you just said, the difference between somebody going, oh, if only I could find some work, versus I'm loving it. I'm sitting down every day, just do something every day, right? Do something. If you're a writer, you'll find something to write about every day. If you really want to make it as a writer, that I have no material thing, then you're not looking. Then you're not feeling it. I live in Saratoga Springs, and we have a writer's retreat here called Yaddo. It's world famous. People come from all over the world to write here. And, I mean, the number of really established writers who have come here and written. Rick Moody has written here. Carl Bernstein comes and writes here. But it dates back, it goes way back to even Aaron Copland came to write music. I mean, it's a lovely, lovely place to inspire creativity. But I've had the opportunity to sit and talk to so many people. How do you get through that writer's block, right? Just do something every day. Just do something every day. And it's about mindset. It's about mindset. You take yourself into, listen, we all know dark, broody, characters. But if you allow yourself, as somebody just trying to break into the business, you allow yourself to go into that hole, it's not going to serve you. It's just not going to serve you. And, you'll probably end up having to go get a job doing something, and your writing's going to end up being pushed to the side. And then one day you're going to, wake up and say, I always wanted to be a writer. Instead of, I am a writer. I am an author.
Absolutely. That's great advice.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope it's okay I told that story, but that's, enthusiasm. It's really the secret to a lot of things.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Laura, you shared just a wealth of wisdom with us today. I really, really appreciate it. And before you go, tell us where people can find out more about you and the work that you're doing.
Thanks for asking. You can go to my website at lauramortonmanagement.com. And I have a YouTube channel at Laura Morton Management, and I'm Mama Morton on Twitter. And please drop by and visit. And I'm so grateful, Tom, that you had me on the show today. So thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, Laura.
Nice. Thanks.